Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Sevenfold BIM Academy. I'm your host Tim Halverson, and in this one we're going to be looking at 5 tips that enhance my workflow using Rhino every single day. These are my bread and butter commands and shortcuts and things that I love to use that make my life more productive, more fluid, and make modeling in Rhino super fun. So I'm going to show you a couple things. Let's just flip over to the screen. All right, so I've got a little sandbox model up here, and we're going to be talking about a couple things: snaps, the pop-up context menu, Seaplanes, selection filters, and how to add keyboard shortcuts. So this is really an introductory, very basic introduction to Rhino. So if you already kind of know these things, maybe you'll learn something new. And let's dive right in. All right, so I've got a sandbox kind of set up here, and let's just go ahead and turn that off for a second. Well, we're going to use it as a reference, so here we go. All right, so for the exercise, go ahead and start by doing a couple layers here. And the first thing I want to do is, assuming you've already got some geometry set up, feel free to model whatever you want to do. I want to talk about snaps. So I really like to use the 3-point rectangular command. If you just use the regular rectangle, you can hit 3-point right up here, and always keep in mind these sub options after you do a basic rectangle. So I'm gonna hit 3-point, and then if I have my snaps on here rather than disabled, if I have them on by default, and I've got center line and midpoint, different things, I can hover and it's gonna hit the endpoint there. Now when I click, as I go here, it's going to start snapping around. But while I'm hovering around, if I get the trajectory or the vector that I want, like this direction here, I can hit tab, and that's going to turn it white and lock in that vector. So I don't have to click anything else. And then I can go this way. Now by default, you see it's going to the C plane there, but I can also snap up and hit tab, lock that in, and I can snap up to something else here, or I can hit tab again to rotate, or just tab one more time to release that, and boom, I've got my surface. This is really nice if you have different geometries. So for example, if I have a line like this, and I want to go ahead and recreate that rectangle, and I've got my C-plane here, I just want to make another geometry at a different angle. I can either snap to that, or I can hit tab and reach beyond that line and maybe all the way out to this surface here. And then as I'm going this direction, I want it to be perpendicular, so I'll hit tab again to lock that in, or not, and then just snap out. So now you can see I've got a perfectly flat surface that is perpendicular to this line here. So this is a really good way to get custom directions based on other geometry in your model. Okay, you can also do that with any modeling tools you do. So, like your lines here. Okay, so in relation to that, I was talking about seaplanes. Explore the seaplane tab here, but the my go-to ones are the set seaplane origin, the select seaplane to object, and then also the rotate C-plane. So if I set the origin, I can click that up here. If I do the rotate, it's going to give me options to rotate around the X, Y, or Z axis. If I just type the X and hit spacebar, it's going to start rotating. It's got a little indicator there. If I hold shift, you can see it locks to that direction, and then as I hold shift again, I can get it up 90 degrees. And so now I've just tilted up my C-plane. So I like the flexibility of this because at any point I can reuse that. If I want to go around the Y now, I can type Y, hold shift to lock in that X, and then I can snap to my surface. Now there's faster ways to do custom surfaces like this. For example, I could do set C-plane to surface, come in here, do that, but then even after I'm in here, maybe it's the wrong direction. I want the Y to be up, the X to be to the side. So at that point, I'm going to use the rotate again. And this time, if I want to do it, I can do Z to keep it in the same plane, rotate that up, and maybe I also want to have the X to this direction. So I can also rotate around Y there. Cool. So these become really common, and I hate going up to this tab all the time, but I end up using them a ton. So the way to make that more efficient is if you middle mouse, boom. If you have a middle mouse, this is called the pop-up menu, and you can customize this. Okay, so I've changed this around, but there's some defaults in here. And again, if I just middle mouse, boom, and I click and hold that little section there, it now sticks. It's called the pop-up menu there. And now I can make this a little bit bigger. And if I want to go grab other commands that are my favorites, like let's say I want to, let's do something else here. Let's just say I love the extrude by surface. So let's just say I like this one. I can hold Control, click, and drag that guy onto my pop-up menu and let go. And now I've just made a copy of that and linked it into the pop-up menu. And it's still got all the sub-menus and stuff like that. So when I close this, next time I middle mouse to open that, it's going to be there. So I've got my scale 1D, even move from time to time. I've got my set seaplanes here. These are the seaplane panels. So if I click that, this is going to open up my named seaplanes on the right here. And this is just nice because sometimes I don't want to have to reach all the way over here to hit the tabs, even though I know I'm going to get them. It's like I'll be moving things, you know, in space, and then I'll want to see its properties. So I'll middle mouse, hit the properties if it's not already selected, and then I might be checking the user attributes or something like that. So, you know, feel free to customize this in any way you want. You'd be surprised how much you use it once you get the hang of it. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is history. Well, let's not talk about history. Let's talk about selection filters. So if you don't have this menu up here available, this is your selection filters. So it's similar to your snaps down here on the bottom, but it's selection filters. So if you have the select tab showing, so show toolbar, and we go down to select, which is right there. I have it actually docked to the right here. And if you go down into that and you have the selection filter, that's what it's going to be. So typically this is up here. Let's grab that, put it up there. So it's usually somewhere up in here. I like this select previous, and so that's why I dock it over here. But if you're not seeing the selection filters, find this guy on the far right, selection filter, and then I like to dock mine in the upper right. And if you are here, go ahead, and if you want to lock it on just poly surfaces, for example, right click on that, and it's going to temporarily lock in on just selecting poly surfaces. So if I do this, you can see it's blinking at me because it's ignoring all of these surfaces, extrusions, and lines, and it's only giving me this poly surface. So that's really, really nice feature, especially if I want to go back, I want just curves, you know, you can select that, isolate, type isolate, and you know, it's gonna start getting me the stuff I want. So yeah, so feel free to do that. It can help you lock in on what you want to do. So what I'm just typing there is isolate to lock in, show, and you can also type, so isolate is the command, unisolate is a command to bring you back a layer, and show is going to show everything that's hidden. Mind you that if you are in the layers here and your layer is turned off, it's not going to show that layer. So if I want to turn off one of these guys here, if I turn off the layer, that's still going to stay hidden even if I type show. Okay, pretty basic, but just a good tip. And then what is one of the other things I love doing? All right, let's talk about adding keyboard shortcuts. So if I want to clean up this big mess, I have a shortcut to keep everything in my left hand. So I'm hitting Control Q, and that is running this delete command right here. Okay, now you could reach over to your keyboard, find the delete button, look down, click the delete button, and that would work. However, when you're going through a lot of geometry, maybe there's a bunch of different things, and you want to select that and just kind of clean it out. Maybe it's a little bit faster to do that with not having to look down at your keyboard, and just using your left hand with something that's anchored, like your pinky is always anchored on Control. So to do that, go up to Tools and Options, and find the keyboard section in the Options menu, and you've got all of your keys available here. So you get your controls, Control A, B, C, etc., etc. Find the stuff that you either want to change, or you can modify this. There's all kinds of options here. Even I haven't explored this enough. However, I have updated my Control Q right here to be delete. And the biggest thing you have to add is just the exclamation point. So add exclamation point, and then you can actually go up here to the command and copy this, Control C to copy that, and then go back to the options, go down to the shortcut you want and paste, and then just go to the front and add the exclamation point, and you are set. Other ones that I've done, Control W is zoom window, which I really like doing. So if I do that, Control W, that gives me a window select to zoom in, and I can zoom in really closely and orbit around. So I really like Control W for that. And the delete, obviously, like I mentioned. So recommend exploring how to put everything in your left hand and do it the way you want to. Okay, so circling back once more on snaps, in conjunction with the Seaplanes we talked about earlier, if I use my pop-up menu, set the Seaplane origin, snap it up to the top here, and then I want to actually model everything on this plane. I also like to turn off my snaps by default, so I'm constantly disabling and enabling this. The benefit with disabling it is you can, let's type a line. Up here, let's select tangent, and then I'm going to click here, and if I hold Alt, you can see now down here, this is temporarily available, making the snaps available. So that's called like a spring-loaded command. So if I unselect Alt and then I select Alt with my left hand, that's going to spring that into availability, and then I can just reach to my other side and click that. So that helps me focus on snapping when I want to snap and not get lost in the midst of my model. Now this is a very simple model, but it could be much more complex. So I like to have the option to do that. So the other thing to keep everything a consistent seaplane, for example, like let's just say I wanted to actually set this seaplane to this object here. Sorry, let's do this one, and I'll just put it there. This is a curving object, but maybe I want to keep everything in this seaplane and then project it onto that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a control point curve, and it basically allows me to sketch. So I can start to, sketch something that I might want. Maybe I want to hide some of this. And then if I want to get a projection that's close to that, I can also type plan. So plan is a great tool, a great command. So it's always going to make it with X to the right and Y up, typing plan. So if I just rotate this, again, I've got that pop-up menu for the seaplane to rotate. I'm going to specify the Y or type Y, hold shift to lock that X direction, click, and then rotate it and hold shift to lock that direction, click to accept it. Now when I type plan, boom. Now it's giving me an orthographic view, you know, plan to the seaplane. So if I had done the previous seaplane when it was like this and then type plan, it's going to actually show me the other side. Okay. And then if I just, you know, redo the seaplane change, I can right click on this button, get me back to that original seaplane, right click up in the command line here to retype plan, and boom, I'm back to where I want to be. This is super, super nice. And if I really, really loved this seaplane, I could go ahead and come over to name seaplanes and just save that. Okay, so now I can actually get in here. I can start to work with it. You know, using the gumball, I've got that gumball turned on. That's this guy, which is a go-to for sure. And then again, if I type M and spacebar, it's going to default to move, which is nice. So if I hold Alt to enable my snaps, click the endpoint, and also include project, now I can actually get to this endpoint here without it actually going to the actual endpoint. I'll show you what I mean. So you can see, because I included project, it's staying on the seaplane, but it's referencing this endpoint back here. So I like to flip on project for things like this, just so I have a clean profile, and then might jump back into plan. Okay, this is what I want. Great. And now I'm going to project that actually onto the geometry. So let's maybe change the color here. Select that curve, type project. Select surfaces to project to. We're going to select this surface back here. We're going to not delete the input. We'll keep it around. And then say the current layer, which is the one I just changed to. Hit spacebar. Boom. And now if we break this plan to do it isometric, I can just hold Control plus Shift and my right mouse button. Boom. And that's going to let me break that plan view to kind of review what's going on. And if I change this color to something more legible, you can see it's right in there. And now it's projected onto my geometry. It's always going to project perpendicular to your active seaplane. So if I had done something else, maybe rotated this seaplane around the X, so I'm typing X and spacebar, holding Shift. There we go. And then maybe tilting it back a little bit like that. And then redoing this, I could also project once again, right clicking, hit project, select the surface I want to project onto, hit spacebar. Now you can see it's starting to change the shape because the direction is perpendicular to, or normal, however you want to think about it, it's to the seaplane, the active seaplane. So I could get fancy by doing different things, by layering up my seaplanes. If it's confusing, you could also just use this elevation here and move that seaplane out so it's more legible. And then type project to seaplane, hit enter, delete input objects. Yes, I do. That's fine. And now it's gonna get me out here so I can work with it. So I'm gonna do that just for now, but once you get the hang of navigating your seaplanes, they're really, really useful for things like this because there's tons of commands that depend on the seaplanes. And then again, if I wanted to type plan, I can be perpendicular to that. I can start to draw new things, project them onto that seaplane, right? And just build up my design. So I'm not saying this is the best design, but just in terms of navigation, this is really, really nice. And I'm holding Control Shift right mouse to break that plan once again, break that perpendicular view. So now I'm in isometric. And if I ever want to get back to a perspective, I can just go to set view, hit the little car here for perspective, and now I'm back in a perspective view. Yeah, otherwise the settings, feel free to explore the grid snap, which is kind of nice. You know, and there's things too. I was showing the rectangle earlier. You could do like the rectangle 3-point before you actually build the surface, and you could input the distance. So while I've started the command, as I'm about to go, I can hold shift and even tab to be perpendicular to that direction. I could type in a distance like 4 feet. You can see up here I'm typing 4 feet. If I hit that and then it's locking in that 4 feet and click, it's going to accept it. And I could also type in a height like 8 feet. It's going to lock in that direction as well. Click to accept. Now I've got a 4 foot wide by 8 foot tall curve. And then what you could do is extrude that curve. And I could turn off solid, or I could keep solid on. Let's just turn it off for a second. And then we could do things like take these two pieces, type split, and then we're going to use this as a cutting object. And now I've got some different things going on here. So I've got these two pieces, and I can work with those. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility. The Seaplane 2, if I go back, you can see how the Seaplane is now relative. Sorry, the gumball is relative to the Seaplane. So if I get comfortable moving my Seaplane around, it's going to be relative to that. So I can work with go-to Seaplanes depending on how reusable I want that to be. So those are all modeling tips. And then finally, if you want to, make this more solid, go-to command is going to be your extrude surface or offset surface. So offset surface, that's going to point the direction. I could flip it if I wanted to. I'll go this direction. I'll set the distance to be like 6 inches. If this is a wall per se, I'm going to keep it solid. And delete input, no, I'll keep it around. Hitting spacebar accepts that. Now I've got my original surface available and the poly surface. So anyway, that just gives you a sense of what's going on. So I realized this was a pretty broad tutorial. However, I think the biggest thing to remember from this is using those snaps like we talked about. So using those snaps, pop-up context menu, Seaplanes. I was using the history a bunch, right-clicking on this. And keyboard shortcuts. So definitely explore that. And I had this selection over here. So and one last little tip is the reason I dock this to the right is the select previous selection. So if you lose your selection, similar to Revit, it has that right click feature to select previous. You can do that right here. So that's really, really useful. And then there's also different things in here like select by name, select by layer, stuff like that. But when I'm doing that, I typically just type cell like name, and that's a whole separate conversation. But I pretty much just, when you type cell, you've got the select all these different options, and that's typically what I use. So, all right, if you enjoyed this video, let's just flip back here. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment with your favorite tools and techniques if you want. Feel free, I'm really curious to see how you're going to use your pop-up menu. What are your go-to keyboard shortcuts, and what are your go-to tools using Rhino every single day? These are the ones that I'm using all the time. and I love them, love them, love them. It definitely makes working in Rhino much more fluid and dynamic. And I'm curious to see what you come up with next with these tips. Realize this got a little bit long, but it's kind of more of an integrated kind of, this is my color palette of Rhino tools that I love to use all the time. So if you didn't like this, go ahead and leave the thumbs down. If you loved it, leave the thumbs up. Appreciate you. And feel free to let me know what you want to see next in our quick tips. Until next time, this is Tim Halverson with Sevenfold. Please, if you're interested, check out the description below. We've got the BIM Academy that's getting built right now. Lots and lots of new content there that's going to be more in-depth, more detailed, have more outcome-driven learning. So if you're interested in that, we're currently receiving emails and people that want to get signed up that are interested in it. So head over to bimacademy.sevenfold.io. And again, that's linked in the description below. And just drop in your email or check it out and sign up. Really appreciate you tuning in this long, and I look forward to making more content coming up. So take care, guys.